The Covenant's reach was a cathedral made of light and mathematics. Marcus Webb had been aboard for 6 hours and still couldn't decide if the architecture was beautiful or deeply unsettling. The way the corridors curved at angles that shouldn't be possible. The way the air tasted like nothing at all. The way every surface seemed to be slightly aware of him. The Galactic Covenant had 17 member species. Each had sent a delegation, and each delegation had sent their predator. Marcus had seen them in the staging bay. The Vethkai had brought something like a mantis crossed with a bad dream. 8 feet tall, compound eyes that tracked everything at once, forearms that ended in serrated hooks. The Drool had brought a creature of shadow and speed, low to the ground, barely visible even under the bay's harsh lighting. The Sarathi had brought something that breathed acid and had no eyes at all, navigating instead by a sonar pulse that made your teeth ache. Marcus had brought a crocodile. Several delegations had already noticed. The Vethkai ambassador, a towering creature of articulated chitin named Kes Ralith, had approached him in the corridor an hour ago with what Marcus could only describe as diplomatic pity. "Your animal," Kes Ralith had said, through the translator bead behind Marcus's ear. "It appears elderly and slow." "He is," Marcus agreed. 63 years old. "Our candidate was born 4 seasons ago. It has already killed 11 rivals," the ambassador said. "Titan hasn't had to kill anything in about 6 years," Marcus said. "He doesn't need to." Kes Ralith had made a sound the translator rendered as contemplative dismissal, and moved on. Marcus went back to the staging bay. The tank had been the first logistical nightmare. Saltwater, temperature-controlled, 17,000 liters. The Covenant's reach had accommodated the request without complaint. One of the few genuinely impressive things about the ship was its ability to reconfigure interior spaces. But the other delegations had watched the installation with visible confusion. Water. The human needed water. Titan lay in it now, motionless. That was the first thing people always got wrong about saltwater crocodiles. They assumed the stillness was laziness. It wasn't. It was economy. It was patience refined over 240 million years into something so pure it had stopped being a strategy and become physics. Marcus sat on the edge of the tank and looked at him. 5.6 meters from snout to tail. That was longer than most people realized until they were standing next to one. The body was armored in osteoderms, bony deposits embedded in the skin, like nature had decided scales weren't enough, and added a layer of armor underneath. The jaw contained 66 teeth, none of which were for chewing. Crocodiles didn't chew. They gripped, they twisted, they waited. The bite force was approximately 1,600 kilograms per square centimeter. For context, a great white shark managed 300, a lion perhaps 60. They were always open. Crocodilians had a third eyelid, a nictitating membrane, that protected the eye while still allowing light detection. He could be asleep and still see you. He often was. "I know," Marcus said quietly. "Not exactly the stars, is it?" One eye moved, just slightly, tracking him. "Covenant wants to see lethality. They want to understand what we come from." Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. "I figured you were the most honest answer." The Crucible Arena was circular, 600 meters in diameter, with viewing galleries arranged in concentric rings above the floor. Every delegation was present. The Covenant's adjudicators, tall, pale, and apparently without distinct facial features, stood at the cardinal points of the arena. The floor could be configured. For the Vethkai candidate, it had been a rocky terrain, with vertical surfaces for the mantis creature to exploit. For the Drool's shadow thing, near total darkness. For the Sarathi's eyeless horror, an echoing chamber that amplified its sonar pulses. When it was Earth's turn, Marcus submitted his configuration request. The adjudicators paused, then they conferred, then one of them approached him. Ambassador Webb. The translator worked on their species too, though it always sounded slightly delayed. like an echo of language rather than language itself. You have requested water. A river, yes. And the temperature of the lighting to simulate tropical sun. Also yes. And nothing else. No terrain features, no obstacles, no prey animals. Marcus looked at the adjudicator steadily. He doesn't need them. The purpose of the Crucible is to demonstrate, I know what the purpose is. Marcus kept his voice even. Configure the water. I'll show you what I brought. They configured the water. A slow river, perhaps 40 meters wide, moved through the center of the arena floor. Shallow at the edges, deep in the middle. The lighting shifted warm and amber, tropical. Humid air rolled off the surface. They lowered Titan in via the transport harness, and he slid into the water without sound. Just a shape, displacing some water, and then nothing. He submerged. The surface stilled. The galleries watched. 60 seconds passed. The Vethkai ambassador leaned toward its adjudicator and said something that the translator, not aimed at them, didn't catch. But Marcus could guess. He'd heard the murmurs starting. He'd seen the visual feeds the other delegations were watching. Infrared, sonar, spectral analysis. Titan was there. They could all see that he was there, but he was motionless, 2 feet below the surface. And to eyes that expected aggression to look like movement, he looked like nothing. He looked like a log. That was the other thing people always got wrong. 3 minutes? 5? Marcus watched the surface of the water. He knew what he was looking for. At 7 minutes and 40 seconds, Titan moved. It was not dramatic. He simply rose through the water column the way the tide comes in, not rushing, not telegraphing, and for one moment he was visible, all 5.6 meters of him, drifting in the shallows near the bank, barely disturbing the surface. His nostrils and eyes crested the waterline. His body was invisible below it. He was, to any prey animal at the waterline, indistinguishable from the riverbank itself. He could hold that position indefinitely. He had once been tracked holding a similar position for 4 hours and 17 minutes, without moving a muscle group, above minimum metabolic threshold. Just waiting, ready, present. A loaded gun that had learned to look like furniture. "I don't understand," said the Sarathi delegate through the translation network. "What is it doing?" "Hunting," Marcus said. "There is nothing to hunt." That's not really the point. What happened next was not planned. Marcus would say so afterward, clearly and on the record, and the Covenant's own sensor logs would confirm it. One of the Drool delegation's support staff, a small, quick-moving creature used for carrying equipment, had gotten turned around in the reconfigured corridors and entered the arena floor through a maintenance access point. It was the size of a terrier. It moved quickly and without particular awareness, the way animals did when they weren't in danger. It came to the water's edge to investigate the unfamiliar smell. What followed lasted less than 2 seconds. There was no warning, there was no signal, there was no performance. The surface of the water opened. That was the only way to describe it. The surface simply opened, and Titan was there. In the air, fully airborne, all 1,000 kilograms of him, jaws spread to their maximum gape, which was a size that the brain refused to process correctly on first viewing. And then he was back in the water, and the support animal was not on the bank anymore, and the surface closed, and he was gone. The galleries were silent, totally, completely, breathlessly silent. The water settled. Titan submerged again. In 40 seconds, the surface was glassy. There was no trace. There was no disturbance. There was nothing to suggest that anything had happened at all. "Oh God," said Marcus quietly. He pressed his hand to his face. That wasn't supposed to. The Drool ambassador was on its feet. The Vethkai ambassador was on its feet. Kes Ralith was staring at the water, with all 4 of its primary visual organs, in an expression the translator couldn't quite categorize, but which Marcus later described as the specific look of something that has just understood it has fundamentally misread a situation. The Covenant adjudicator nearest to Marcus turned slowly. "Ambassador Webb." I'm sorry about that animal, the adjudicator said, and there was something different in its translated voice, something that hadn't been there before. It did not perform. No, Marcus said carefully. It did not display. It did not threaten. It did not demonstrate. No, it simply killed. Marcus looked at the water. Titan was back in his position near the bank, eyes up, patient, already reset, already ready. He's been doing that, Marcus said, for 240 million years. He was doing that before the dinosaurs. He watched them come, he watched them go. He's still here. The adjudicator was quiet for a long moment. The other candidates, it said finally, we understood them. We could see their lethality. We could measure it, assess it, categorize it. A pause. This animal does not appear lethal, until it is, and then there is no time to. There isn't. The deliberations took 4 hours. Marcus sat with Titan's tank. They'd moved him back after the arena, and waited. The other ambassadors came and went. Kes Rowlett stopped by and stood in silence for 3 minutes, watching the water, before leaving without saying anything. The Sarathi delegate made a low subsonic sound that the translator didn't attempt. When the Covenant's head adjudicator finally summoned Marcus to the chamber, every other delegation was already there. We have concluded the crucible, the adjudicator said, and we find ourselves with a question we did not anticipate. It paused. Every species brought us a predator. Most of those predators are extraordinary. Faster than yours, larger than yours, more visually impressive than yours. Several of them are possessed of biological weapons, toxins, projectile mechanisms, sensory capabilities beyond anything your planet has produced. Marcus said nothing. But, we asked for your world's deadliest predator, the adjudicator continued, and you gave us something very specific. You gave us something that does not waste energy on display. Something that has no interest in being impressive. Something that has reduced the act of killing to its simplest and purest expression. That it simply must occur, and then it occurs, and then there is nothing else. The adjudicator looked at him. We asked all 17 of you the same question. You are the only species that understood it. Marcus thought about Titan in his tank. 63 years old. Missing a section of tail from a fight in 1987. Patient as geology. Untroubled by the stars, by the ship, by the alien air, because he'd lived in stranger places than this. Because for 240 million years, his kind had survived every extinction event this universe had seen fit to deliver, and had never once changed their approach. Don't rush, don't telegraph, don't perform. Wait, and when the moment comes, and it always comes, don't hesitate. We are, said the head adjudicator, prepared to admit Earth to the Galactic Covenant. Marcus exhaled slowly. On one condition, it added. He looked up. We wish to know, the adjudicator said with a gravity that suggested it had been discussed at great length. How many of those creatures exist on your planet? Marcus thought about Australia, about the Northern Territory, about the 1,200 rivers and waterways and billabongs and coastal wetlands where saltwater crocodiles lived in numbers that the last census had estimated at somewhere between 100,000 and 150,000. A few, he said. And humans, the adjudicator pressed, coexist with them? Marcus thought about Darwin, about the warning signs on the boat ramps, about the rangers who tracked them, the researchers who tagged them, the tourists who took photos from distances that were, technically, safe, about the fundamental, unspoken agreement that existed between his species and theirs. We know you're there, you know we're here, and we both know what you can do, and we proceed accordingly. We do, he said. The adjudicator was quiet again. Then it turned to the other delegates. 17 species, it said, to the room, and only one of them lives alongside a creature like that. Willingly, not by necessity, not because they cannot kill it. They have chosen to share their world with it. It paused. That tells us something about humanity that the Crucible alone could not. It turned back to Marcus. Welcome to the Covenant, Ambassador Webb. On the transport home, Marcus sat with the tank again. The stars moved outside the viewport. Real stars now, not the mathematical suggestion of them that the Covenant ship had offered. Titan hadn't moved in an hour. "You're in," Marcus told him. "One eye, just slightly. All of us, technically, but you did the work." The water was still. The ship was quiet. Somewhere out there, 17 civilizations were updating their understanding of what Earth was and what humans were, and what it meant that the most successful predator in the history of a biologically violent planet had looked at the stars and sent as its representative the one animal that had never needed to change. Titan breathed. Marcus watched the water and thought about patience.